"Don't say a word," Althea whispered. Richard froze at the top of the staircase, his heartbeat louder than the piano music drifting from below. Through the half-open door, his wife knelt beside the fireplace, tossing papers into the flames, his father's trust documents, gone up in smoke. The smell of burning ink filled the room. He started to speak, but Althea's trembling hand stopped him. "If you talk now, they'll win. Before we begin, please like, subscribe and tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, Malaysia, UK, Australia, Jamaica." Richard Langston was the kind of billionaire people in Indiana liked to talk about but never really knew. He didn't flaunt his wealth. He lived quietly on the outskirts of Bloomington, in a cedar-paneled estate that smelled faintly of coffee and sawdust. His father, Thomas Langston, had built an empire in manufacturing. Richard inherited it, but not his father's coldness. Where Thomas barked orders, Richard asked questions. For years, his calm made him untouchable. Competitors couldn't rattle him. The board respected him. Employees trusted him. But the one person who didn't was the woman who shared his house. Camilla Langston was elegance turned sharp edge. Every inch of her was curated, pearls, posture, precision. To the outside world, she was the picture of poise. Inside the house, silence hung heavy between them. Meals passed without eye contact. Compliments felt rehearsed. Something had gone missing between them. A heartbeat, a truth. And yet, Richard didn't see it. Not at first. The sign he missed. 3 months before the night of the fire, Richard had found a receipt tucked in a novel on her nightstand. A bill from a private investigator in Chicago. When he asked about it, she laughed it off. "Insurance paperwork," she'd said. But she never looked him in the eye. He told himself not to pry. That was mistake number 1. Because ignoring small lies is how big ones survive. The whisper before the fall. Every morning, Althea brought coffee to Richard's office. She'd been the Langstons' maid for 8 years, a quiet black woman in her 50s who moved like someone who knew how to disappear into silence. One day, as she set the cup down, she hesitated. "Sir," she said softly, "have you ever heard people say walls can listen?" Richard smiled politely. "Only in fairy tales." But her eyes said something else entirely. "Then I hope your fairy tale has a happy ending." He didn't think about that again, until the night everything broke. The routine before ruin. That Friday was supposed to be ordinary. Richard was in Indianapolis finalizing a contract, planning to stay overnight. But the meeting wrapped early, and by 8 p.m., he was back on Highway 37 heading home. He thought Camilla would be surprised. Maybe they could finally talk. Maybe he could ask her what she really wanted. He practiced the words on the drive. Simple, disarming questions meant to heal what felt broken. He didn't know that by the time he reached his driveway, healing was no longer possible. The light in the wrong room. When he parked outside, he noticed the faintest glow in the study window. Camilla's study, not his. She never worked that late. He grabbed his briefcase, stepped inside quietly, and heard faint rustling. The smell hit him first, burning paper, sharp and chemical. He moved down the hall, every step measured, every breath shallow. And then he saw her. Camilla, in her silk robe, kneeling before the fireplace. Flames licked through stacks of documents. Her face was calm, focused, almost rehearsed. He opened his mouth, but a hand gripped his wrist. Enter the whisper. Althea stood behind him, eyes wide. "Don't," she mouthed. He almost pulled away, but she shook her head. "She's not alone," she whispered. That's when he saw it, barely visible through the reflection in the glass cabinet. A small camera light blinking red. Someone was watching. He froze, and for the first time, fear replaced anger. The billionaire who'd commanded boardrooms suddenly couldn't command his own house. The chain of consequences. Because he stayed silent, Camilla believed her plan was working. Because Althea stopped him, the recordings kept rolling, evidence collecting on their side, not hers. And because of that one whisper, Richard's life didn't collapse that night. Not yet. The unseen enemy. From upstairs, a faint ringtone chimed. Camilla's voice softened as she picked up. "Yes, it's done," she said. Richard's pulse spiked. "Done?" What was done? Althea guided him back up the stairs, her voice barely audible. Whatever you think you saw, sir, it's worse. Don't confront her tonight. She wants you angry. She needs you to react. How do you know? He whispered. Because someone tried the same thing to your father, she said. And I was there. That line hung in the air like thunder that hadn't cracked yet. The stranger on the phone. Later that night, as Richard sat in his office, trying to piece it all together, his cell phone buzzed. A known number. He almost ignored it, but something told him to answer. A male voice, distorted, calm. Mr. Langston, it's a shame you're so trusting. Check your safe tomorrow. You'll find the proof of her love for you. Then the line went dead. He didn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because that voice didn't sound like a stranger. It sounded like someone who'd been in his house. The morning after. At dawn, Richard opened his private safe. Inside, where his father's legal files once sat, were ashes sealed in a glass jar, and a note. Consider this your warning. Althea found him standing there, still in last night's clothes. She burned everything, he said quietly. Althea nodded. Not everything. Some things can't be burned. What do you mean? He asked. But she just looked at him with that same unsettling calm. Just promise me, sir, don't raise your voice. Not yet. You ever been betrayed so quietly it almost felt polite? That's where Richard stood, heartbroken, mouth shut, still deciding whether silence made him weak or wise. If you've ever swallowed pain to protect your peace, stay with this story. Because sometimes the people who whisper, "Be quiet," aren't silencing you, they're saving you. Subscribe, and let's find out together what happens when the truth finally speaks. By sunrise, Richard Langston had already lost trust in his own home. The walls felt closer. The silence heavier. He wasn't sure which stung more, what Camilla had done, or how calmly she'd done it. But one thing was certain now, Althea knew more than she'd said. And that meant the truth had been living under his roof all along. The maid's confession. Sir, Althea said carefully, standing near the doorway, before you ask why I stopped you last night, I need you to understand something. She reached into her apron and pulled out an old, rusted key, one he hadn't seen before. This used to be your father's. Richard frowned. My father's? She nodded. It opens a locked panel behind the wine cellar. Whatever's behind it, your wife already tried to destroy. That was all it took. The questions came flooding in. Why would Camilla care about something his father hid? How did Althea even know it existed? But the maid's eyes stayed steady. He trusted me to protect it. And now it's your turn. The cellar door. Down in the dim cellar, the smell of oak barrels and dust mixed with something metallic. Althea slid the key into a nearly invisible slot in the brick wall. The latch released with a soft click, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside, no gold, no jewels, just a small metal box covered in soot. Richard opened it. Inside lay a flash drive and a folded letter in his father's handwriting. The letter read, If you're reading this, Richard, then someone inside your house has already betrayed you. Don't call the police. Don't call your lawyers. Trust only the one who stayed silent when the world shouted. His father had written that decades ago. And suddenly, the whisper, "Be quiet," made sense. The flash drive. The flash drive contained footage, grainy, time-stamped from 2012. It showed a younger Thomas Langston in his office, arguing with a woman whose face wasn't visible. She was yelling about shares, inheritance, and marriage documents. Then, faintly, another voice joined, the same one Richard had heard on the phone the night before. That smooth, calculated tone. You'll get what's yours, as long as Richard never learns who you really are. Then the footage cut out. Richard's chest tightened. Someone had blackmailed his father, and it wasn't just anyone. It was the same man calling now. The chain that never broke. Because his father stayed silent, Richard inherited a company built on secrets. Because Richard ignored the signs, Camilla's betrayal grew roots in that silence. And now, because Althea broke her own promise of quiet, the truth was crawling its way back from the dark. He looked at her. You knew all this time? Her eyes softened. Your father didn't just trust me, sir. He saved my son's life once. I owed him everything. But when your wife started asking questions about the Langston Trust, I knew she'd found the same trail of lies that ruined him. What lies? Richard demanded. The ones that made him think loyalty could be bought. The dinner party. That evening, the Langstons were scheduled to host a dinner at the country club. Richard almost canceled. But Althea insisted he go. Act normal, she said. She's expecting you to react. Camilla greeted him like nothing was wrong, smile flawless, hand resting lightly on his arm. Guests laughed, clinking glasses, unaware that half the laughter in the room was wired with deceit. Halfway through dinner, Richard excused himself and stepped outside for air. That's when he heard it, Camilla's voice behind the terrace wall. Don't worry, she was saying. Once he signs over the remaining assets, it's done. You'll get your cut. A man's voice answered. Good. Because if he finds out what really happened to his father, we're both dead. The name hit like a punch. Trevor Langston. His cousin and CFO of the company. Remember the letter? His father's warning replayed in his head. Someone inside your house has already betrayed you. But maybe his father meant more than the house. Maybe he meant the family name itself. Richard felt cold air rush through him. The world was suddenly smaller, sharper, crueler. And yet, he kept walking back toward the table. Because if Althea was right, he had to let this betrayal play out to the end. The trap. The next morning, Richard called Trevor into his office. He smiled, casual, pretending not to know. I've been thinking about restructuring. You'd get majority control while I take a back seat. Maybe Camilla and I could finally travel. Trevor's face lit up. That's generous. Richard watched his cousin's reflection in the window. Generosity's a family habit. That afternoon, Trevor wired himself $18 million from the company's contingency fund, leaving a digital trail so sloppy even an intern could trace it. By evening, Richard had the proof he needed. But here's where it gets crazy. Trevor wasn't working alone. The call from Camilla. At 11:43 p.m., Richard's phone buzzed. Camilla's voice trembled, not with fear but fury. You think you're clever? Trevor told me everything. If you try to stop us, the press will know what you did to your father. He stayed silent. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than panic. Do you hear me, Richard? We'll bury you. He finally spoke. You already tried. Then he hung up. The missing files. At dawn, Richard opened his laptop, ready to send the evidence to federal authorities. But every file, every screenshot, every recording was gone. Deleted remotely. Only one folder remained, encrypted. Its title, Althea. He hesitated before opening it. Because if everything pointed to Camilla and Trevor, why would his maid's name be the last one left? She almost turned away, but she saw it. A single folded note left on her cleaning cart, written in his father's handwriting. She's not your enemy. She's your inheritance. The note shook in Richard's hand. She's not your enemy. She's your inheritance. He stared at the words for minutes, his chest tightening, heartbeat echoing through the empty corridor. Every instinct screamed that it couldn't be real. His father would never call a maid inheritance. And yet, hadn't his father always spoken in riddles? The man built an empire out of secrets. Maybe this was his last one. The envelope hidden in the walls. The following morning, Richard confronted Althea in the kitchen. The air smelled of coffee and lemon cleaner, as if the world still made sense somewhere outside this house. I found the note, he said quietly. Althea froze. Then she nodded, reaching for the small cupboard above the fridge. She pulled down a weathered envelope sealed in wax. Your father gave me this the night he died. He said to give it to you only when you stopped trusting love. Inside was a photo, his father standing beside a young woman who looked exactly like Althea, only younger. On the back, scrawled in blue ink, for Richard. Trust her like you trusted me. Who is she? Richard asked. Althea's voice cracked. My twin sister. She worked for your father years before me. The missing files come back. That evening, Richard's laptop buzzed. The deleted files had somehow returned. Each labeled by date, each showing transactions linking Trevor and Camilla to an offshore account under a corporate alias, Halcyon Estate Holdings. He almost laughed. Halcyon, the same name as the hotel chain his father once wanted to expand into. Except this account had nothing to do with hotels. It was a laundering operation. Now it made sense. His wife's obsession with moving funds, her sudden interest in joint investments, her secrecy. But how far back did this go? He didn't have to wonder for long. Because buried inside one file was an audio recording. Camilla's voice. Once he signs over the estate, we disappear. And if he doesn't? The accident will look natural. The words hit him like ice water. His father's death hadn't been an accident. Because of that. Because his father trusted the wrong people, the company fell into rot. Because Richard inherited it blindly, Camilla and Trevor found a way to weaponize his legacy. And because Althea protected the truth, she'd carried the burden that should have been his. He felt sick. He had been sleeping beside the same woman who plotted the death that gave him his fortune. The mistresses slip up. That night, Camilla came home late, her perfume sharp, her smile strained. She found Richard sitting by the fire, glass of bourbon untouched. "Rough day?" she asked casually. He didn't answer. Just watched her pour herself a drink. Then, as she turned her back, he said, "You know, Trevor called." She froze. "Oh?" she managed. "What did he want?" "He said the wire transfer went through." The glass shattered in her hand. For one perfect second, everything she'd hidden flashed through her expression. Fear, guilt, calculation. Richard smiled faintly. "You should probably get that cleaned up. Remember the flash drive?" Later that night, Richard replayed the old footage of his father arguing in that dimly lit office. He noticed something he'd missed before. A symbol on the corner of the document Camilla had been waving. A small emblem shaped like an olive branch. He searched the term online and found it linked to an offshore legal firm, run by none other than Trevor Langston. So, Camilla had been in the picture even before his father's death. She hadn't married into wealth. She'd inherited the crime that created it. The dinner trap. Richard decided to strike quietly. The next week, he invited Camilla and Trevor to dinner at the Halcyon Grand Hotel, a place Camilla adored for its exclusivity. She arrived in a new gold dress, dripping confidence. Trevor followed, smug and relaxed, as if the world still belonged to them. As they sat down, Richard smiled. Thought it'd be nice to celebrate new beginnings. Camilla raised her glass. "To honesty," she said sweetly. He almost laughed. "To truth," he corrected. Moments later, the hotel manager approached their table. "Mr. Langston, your suite is ready. Shall I charge it to your personal account?" Trevor frowned. "Your account?" Camilla blinked. "Wait, I thought you said—" Richard's voice cut through. "This hotel belongs to the Langston estate. Always has. So every bill, every stay, every champagne glass you've ever ordered here was mine." Camilla went pale. Trevor's fork slipped from his hand. "The hidden cameras." He continued calmly. "And because this property belongs to me, I control the security feed." He gestured toward the far corner, where a small monitor flickered to life, displaying archived footage of Camilla and Trevor in that very suite months ago, plotting his downfall. Their voices clear. Their intentions undeniable. Every guest at nearby tables turned. The silence was suffocating. Richard leaned in, his tone quiet but lethal. "You didn't just betray a man, Camilla. You walked into the one place you could never own." The arrest. By the time police arrived, both Camilla and Trevor were speechless. Federal agents had already been tipped off by Althea, who delivered the full archive of evidence earlier that morning. As they were led out in handcuffs, Camilla turned, eyes wide with disbelief. "You think this makes you clean, Richard? Your father's sins built this empire." He met her gaze coldly. "Maybe. But I'm the one ending it." And as she disappeared into the flashing blue lights, Richard felt something break, something bitter but freeing. The truth about Althea. The next day, Althea prepared to leave. Her job, she said, was done. "Wait," Richard stopped her. "My father said you were my inheritance." "What did he mean?" She smiled softly. He meant this: integrity, patience, faith. I was the one thing he could trust you'd need, not own. And now you don't need me anymore. Her eyes glistened. Be proud of yourself, Mr. Langston. You didn't just protect the family name, you redeemed it. Sometimes life doesn't hand you miracles. It hands you truth disguised as pain. If you've ever trusted the wrong people and still found a way to stand, maybe that means you're stronger than you think. Don't scroll past stories like this one. Subscribe, because some lessons only reveal themselves when you're brave enough to listen to them through. For the first time in years, Richard Langston's house was quiet. No shouting. No deception. No sound of heels clicking down marble floors. Just silence, heavy, hollow, and almost unfamiliar. Camilla and Trevor were behind bars. The estate was safe again. But Richard couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. Something deeper than betrayal. Something older than greed. Because despite everything, one question still clawed at his mind. Why had his father trusted a maid with secrets meant for family? The newspaper headline. A week later, the morning paper hit the doorstep. The headline read, Langston Scandal Unveiled, Empire Built on Hidden Deeds. Buried beneath it, smaller print. Estate transfer discrepancies under review. Richard's stomach turned. The public wasn't just focused on Camilla and Trevor's crimes anymore. Now they were digging into the Langston legacy itself. Every contract. Every partnership. Every deal. The empire he tried to save was now the one under fire. Remember the photo of Althea's twin? That photo from his father's envelope, the one with Althea's twin, wouldn't leave his mind. There had been no record of her anywhere. No mention in any file, any database, any obituary. Almost as if she'd never existed. Until that morning. Because in the stack of letters delivered with the day's mail was a small brown envelope, addressed in neat cursive. No return address. Just one line. She told you to trust her. Here's why. Inside was a hospital document. A birth certificate. And under mother's name, it read, Martha Langston. His grandmother. And under child's name, it read, Althea Bennett. Because of that revelation, everything shifted. It meant Althea wasn't just a maid. She was family. His father hadn't hired her to protect the house. He'd brought her back home after years of estrangement. Richard's pulse quickened. Had Althea known all along? Was that why she had been so careful? So gentle, yet so distant? He needed answers. But when he drove to her small apartment outside Bloomington, she wasn't there. The landlord said she'd checked out that morning. No forwarding address, just a note left behind. He opened it, hands trembling. It read, You've rebuilt what was broken. Now let it breathe. Some truths live better unspoken. The missing audit files. When Richard returned home, one of his assistants, Daryl, rushed in with panic on his face. Sir, there's something wrong with the audit archives, he said. Half the company's digital backups are missing. Richard frowned. What do you mean missing? They were deleted, remotely. Last access came from the same login used the night your father died. Richard's mind spun. That couldn't be possible. The account had been closed years ago. Unless someone else still had access. Who used it? He asked. Daryl hesitated. The credentials matched. Althea Bennett. Little did he know that single name would reopen every wound he'd just begun to heal. Because as he traced the remaining data fragments, one folder reappeared, encrypted, hidden behind layers of security. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside were dozens of recorded phone calls between his father and a woman's voice. Soft, calm, familiar. Althea's. Don't tell him yet, she said in one recording. He needs to see who they truly are before he knows who I am. Richard sat back, stunned. His entire life had been a chessboard. Every betrayal, every test, every heartbreak had been part of something bigger. The journal in the attic. Unable to sleep, Richard wandered to the attic that night. He hadn't been up there since his father's passing. Dust layered everything like time itself had been trying to bury the truth. There, under an old trunk, he found a leather-bound journal. His father's handwriting covered the first page. For the son I raised and the daughter I lost. He turned the page. It told the story of how his grandmother disowned Althea's mother for marrying beneath her class, how his father had searched for Althea for decades, and how he finally found her working as a housekeeper in Ohio. Richard, one entry read, "You will inherit power. She will inherit wisdom. Together, you will inherit redemption." The FBI knock. Before Richard could even process the words, headlights flashed across the windows. Moments later, a hard knock at the door. "Mr. Langston," said a firm voice. "FBI. We need to talk." They presented a warrant. "We're reopening the case surrounding your father's death. We believe new evidence suggests inside involvement." Richard's throat tightened. "You think I had something to do with it?" The agent hesitated. "Not you, sir. But someone in your household staff. Someone who disappeared 2 weeks ago." The name on the paper made his blood run cold. Althea Bennett. Because of that, everything he thought he knew about her, the kindness, the wisdom, the loyalty, felt like it had been flipped upside down. Had she been orchestrating things all along? Protecting him? Or controlling him? The agent explained she was wanted for questioning over falsified records tied to the Langston estate transfers. Richard's father's death, the missing archives, even Camilla's arrest. Althea's fingerprints were everywhere. But something didn't add up. If she wanted power, she could have taken it. She had every secret, every password, every chance. So why vanish now? The hotel letter. That night, Richard drove to his father's old lakeside hotel, the one that started the empire. It was closed now, quiet except for the hum of the wind against the glass. At the front desk, a small envelope waited under his name. Inside was one final note. It was from Althea. "You were never my pawn, Richard. You were the only one I trusted to do what I couldn't. I didn't run. I protected the last piece of your father's legacy, the truth." Attached was a flash drive. On it, hours of recordings and proof that the real insider, the one who caused his father's death, wasn't Althea or Camilla. It was Trevor's father, the man who'd built the Langston Company alongside his father decades ago. The news report. The next morning, every news outlet exploded with headlines. Langston Empire cleared of corruption allegations, hidden betrayal exposed. The story went viral, but Althea never resurfaced. Some said she moved overseas. Others claimed she lived quietly under a new name. All Richard knew was that somewhere out there, the woman everyone overlooked had restored what generations had broken. One evening, as he sat alone by the window, the phone rang once, unknown number. He answered. A woman's voice whispered, calm and steady. "Be quiet, Richard. They're not done watching." Then silence. For weeks, Richard Langston lived in the quiet that follows chaos. The kind of quiet that doesn't bring peace, only reflection. The headlines had died down. The lawyers had stopped calling. But the phone call from that unknown number still echoed in his head. "Be quiet, Richard. They're not done watching." He couldn't shake it. Who were they? And why, even now, did Althea still sound like she was protecting him? The security footage that shouldn't exist. One night, unable to sleep, Richard went back through the estate's security footage, looking for something, anything that might explain her warning. Hours turned into dawn. Nothing stood out. Until 3:16 a.m., exactly 2 days before Camilla's arrest. There she was, Althea, slipping through the back gate, carrying a small black box. She wasn't sneaking away. She was burying something near the garden wall. Richard froze the frame. The timestamp. The direction. The shadow of her face turned toward the camera, almost knowingly. It was as if she wanted him to see this one day. He went outside and dug in the exact spot where she'd stood. After several minutes, his shovel hit something solid, a metal box, locked tight. Inside, wrapped in faded fabric, was a small envelope. It read, "The truth your father couldn't say aloud." Inside was a single-page letter in his father's handwriting. "Son, if you're reading this, it means she kept her promise. You've seen the good and the ugly in people. But remember, power without love ruins every man who holds it. Trust Althea. She knows more about this family than I ever did." Richard folded the letter carefully, But something about the last line made him pause. How could she know more than his own father? The files Althea deleted. He remembered the deleted digital archives, the ones Daryl said were wiped from the system. On instinct, he connected the flash drive Althea had left him to his father's old desktop. A folder appeared, one he hadn't seen before. Its name, the missing ledger. Inside were scanned pages of transactions spanning decades. But this wasn't corporate embezzlement. It was donations, quiet acts of charity, medical bills paid for strangers, properties gifted to families in debt. And at the bottom of every file, one name appeared, Althea Bennett. She had used the Langston wealth not for power, but for redemption. All the while, she'd been restoring everything the greed of the family had destroyed. The board meeting that changed everything. By the following week, Richard called an emergency meeting with his company's board. Every seat was filled, the air thick with tension and curiosity. They expected him to sell, resign, or crumble. Instead, he did something no one predicted. He opened the ledger on the big screen and said, "For years, we built an empire that fed our pride. Now we rebuild one that feeds people." Some board members scoffed. Others stared in disbelief. But one by one, heads began to nod. By the end of the meeting, the vote was unanimous. Langston Holdings would pivot toward community development, affordable housing, education funds, and healthcare initiatives. What had been a legacy of arrogance would become a legacy of purpose. And though Richard didn't say it aloud, everyone knew whose name had guided that decision. Because of that one decision, the company's public image transformed overnight. Media outlets that once mocked the Langston name now praised its rebirth. And then one morning, as Richard arrived at the hotel for a press event, he saw her, Althea, standing quietly at the edge of the lobby, wearing the same gray coat she used to wear years ago. Her hair streaked with silver now, her posture calm, as if she'd never truly left. The unexpected confession. "Why did you come back?" Richard asked softly. She smiled faintly. "I didn't come back, Richard. I never really left." From her bag, she handed him a small box. Inside it, a gold pocket watch engraved with the Langston family crest. "I kept it because it wasn't time yet," she said. "Now it is." He turned it over. Inside the lid was a second engraving. "Family is not blood. It's truth." Tears stung his eyes. "You knew all along, didn't you?" She nodded. "Your father made mistakes. But he believed the Langstons could change. He believed you could." The letter that ends it all. As the crowd filled the lobby, cameras flashing, Richard took the podium. But instead of giving a speech about wealth or rebirth, he unfolded a letter, the same one from his father's box, and began to read. He told the truth. About the scandals. The greed. The redemption. About Althea's quiet role in saving the legacy everyone else tried to bury. By the end, the room was silent. Then the applause came, not thunderous, but genuine. In that moment, the Langston Empire wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to everyone Althea had touched, everyone his father had forgotten. The unknown caller returns. That night, his phone buzzed again. The same number. He answered with a steady breath. But this time, there was no whisper. No warning. Only Althea's voice, warm and calm. "You did well, Richard," she said. "The house finally feels like home again." Then, a click. Line disconnected. He never heard from her again. The full circle. Months later, the Langston Hotel reopened, not as a luxury retreat for the elite, but as a training institute for underprivileged youth. In the lobby hung a single framed photo, Althea, smiling faintly beside Richard's father, decades ago. Under it a plaque read, "For the woman who whispered truth when silence was safer." Every guest who walked through those doors saw her face, her story, her quiet revolution. And maybe, in some quiet corner of Indiana, she still watches, the woman who chose truth over power, who rebuilt an empire one secret at a time. Sometimes the people the world calls servants end up saving the very souls that once ignored them. Sometimes, the ones who whisper, "Be quiet," aren't silencing, they're protecting. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Subscribe to this channel, not for the views, but because stories like this remind us that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes, it's the sound of strength waiting to be understood.